You have this paper, which is my favorite paper in all of psychology, if I'm being very honest with you, which is to cognize is to categorize. Cognition is categorization. I was wondering if you could explain as to why you believe categorization is so important into our cognition, and also before we get into that, maybe tell us what categorization is in the first place.
Okay. First of all, as in many things, I've been wrong, and already when you were taking the course, I said that it's cognition. Categorize cognition is mostly categorization, but there are things that we should be ready to call cognition that are not categorization. So, but first, let me say what categorization is. In some ways, it sounds too general. To categorize is to do the right thing with the right kind of thing. And that's a circular definition because kind means category.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's like saying to categorize is to do the right thing with the right category of thing.
Right.
Uh, but but we know what it is to do the right thing with anything, and naming things, recognizing them, naming them, identifying them is the main way we do it. But it's not the thing that the right thing to do is not necessarily to call a spade a spade. Yes, if you recognize spades and you call them spades, you're categorizing. But but there are there are tons of other things you do with spades besides call them spades. For example, you pick them up and you shovel with them, right? And that's the beginning of the story. The way you uh, ground the meaning of a word is first through your sensory motor interaction with the category to which it refers. If you open a dictionary, this is going to be boring for you because you've heard it before, but if you open a dictionary and you look at the words, 99% of them are category names. They're content words like nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. You can point not only to apples and square and spades, etc. You can also point to more abstract things like that's good, that's bad, that's fair, that's not fair. That and those things become you can turn them into general nouns, saying all the things that are fair are what we mean by justice, and so on and so forth. So basically, those even abstract words are names of categories. They're far away from the from the example that I always use, which is the mushroom island, where you're marooned on an island and it's full of, and you're a vegan, of course. So the there's full of mushrooms, and mushrooms are vegan, but you don't know which ones are edible and which ones aren't. So the only way you can find out which ones are edible, with which the right thing to do is to eat them, and which ones are inedible, with which the right thing to do is to avoid them or throw them away, is to try a little bit, see if it makes you a little sick, and then by trial and error, if you're lucky, before you starve, you figure out which ones are the edible ones. And that's categorization. And that's what categorization is for, starting from mushrooms all the way up to goodness, truth, justice, etc., and the full power of language.
Okay. I just want to add like a clarification, if you can. It sounds like the way you described it, that categorization is a lot like learning. Is categorization only learning, or is there more to it than just that?
There are you have categories that you didn't learn, you were
Mm-hmm.
born with. You have feature in general. When you categorize, the way you do it is by features, and you can detect the features that distinguish the members of the category from the non-members. With mushrooms, it's simple, it's the edible ones and the non-edible ones. With a taxonomy of animals, it's the features that distinguish giraffes from zebras, from impala, from bears, etc. And and in general, the features have to be learned from experience, by trial and error, what's called supervised and unsupervised learning. But there are also innate feature detectors, and colors, the ones that I started with, are the famous ones. We learn to call red red, orange orange, and green green, etc. But we don't have to learn the features. And
Mm.
non-speaking animals also have those categories because they know the right thing to do with red things and green things, and they can tell them apart. So there are innate categories that you're born with, and that means innate category feature detectors, but most of them are learned. And that's another exercise with the dictionary. Not only are almost all the words in the dictionary category names, but almost all the category names are learned rather than innate.
Right. And how many categories would you say, or does the research corpus say, are actually innate versus learned? Because there's obviously the
I have
nativist empirical
I have
divide.
no idea. I have no idea, and it's not a well-defined question because a lot of the innate categories are things that we don't name. They're just that we recognize and we don't even give them a name. But I can tell you, I can give you numbers for something, which is how many categories do you have to ground directly by trial and error and name them, so that from that point on, language can take over. But that I can tell you. But I can't tell you how many innate categories there are.
Okay, so then to learn or acquire categories requires more, or sorry, it requires a minimum amount of interaction with the environment, and then language takes over it after a minimal amount, that minimal amount,
But
right?
language can take over. I don't think it does completely take over. The way I used to put it in the course is that it's not as if once you learn the minimal grounding categories and their names, you go into a dark room and the rest of your life is just verbal. It's not
Yeah, yeah.
right. I mean, you're still going around seeing new things, and not just. In other words, the example that I use all the time, you could learn zebra from being told if you know what a horse is and you know what stripes are and black and white are, you can be told what a zebra is in words, and but you have to know what black, white, etc., means. But you may learn what a zebra is directly later in life too, without anybody telling you anything. So it's not. You can do it just verbally after you have a minimal grounding set, but you won't.